Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. Tonight on the show, we're going to be taking a closer look at the reason for this soon-to-be-launched book titled Rebirth, Reformasi, Resistance and Hope in Malaysia Baharu. Our guests tonight, we have Kean Wong, who's the editor of the book. He's also working on a project at the Southeast Asian Centre at the University of Sydney. And Tashny Sukumaran, who contributed a piece to the book titled The Amazing Race for Malaysia Across the World. She's also the Malaysian correspondent for South China Morning Post. Guys, welcome to the show. Good to have you here. Now, again, I said I'd like to start with, I guess, the raison d'etre for this book. Why put this book together, Kean?
Well, it sort of came about partly from the series I was editor of last year on Malaysia, on a historic year for the Australian National University's Southeast Asia site, New Mandala. And from that, however, I think it seemed very apparent and important, at least for me as a journalist. And I think that Malaysians tend not to document their own histories very well. And I think we had a very historic moment last year in which there were a whole bunch of books and other things coming out now. And one thing I found a bit problematic was that the great majority of them were what some people might call armchair punditry, and a lot of opinions, but very little factual reporting and reportage on the ground, I thought. And also, I think the other thing that wasn't privileged very much was really discussions about policy and the issues and the grappling with actually very difficult problems of policy and reform. So that's partly what the book is about.
Okay. Right. So you feel a gap that you think exists in the literature that's been produced following the this power shift, you might want to call it. The question is, you know, what can people expect, and who were you looking to fill that gap along with you? Because you have a huge range of individuals who contribute to this book, and Tashny, because you're one of them. Tell us, what were you looking for when you went out and looked for, when you were commissioning chapters for the book?
Some of it was already commissioned last year when I was editing the series. Some of them are fresh commissions, and some of them are celebrations of actually what I thought were the best reportage during the very hectic campaign that was published in Malaysia Kini by a lot of young journalists who did great work, I thought, and deserved to be celebrated and marked, you know, in some way. And I thought it was really good for us to have this document of some sort. I didn't think of it as a book, but on the other hand, I thought, you know, we should take ourselves a bit more seriously. And I think we also, as Malaysians, you know, we always are quite, what do you call it, casual and perhaps overly modest. And I think last year, I mean, I look at it from outside, from a Southeast Asian perspective, with other Southeast Asianists, you know, from abroad. And Malaysia was an amazing story for those who might believe in democracy, and also in what, you know, extraordinary things that ordinary people can do. And it's very rare to have what do you call it, a sort of change of regime or change of government through the ballot box.
That's right. We made voting sexy again.
It's very rare. It's very rare.
Democracy sexy again, perhaps?
Yeah.
Tashny, I want to ask you about your contribution to the book. So Kean said that this is really about fact-based reporting, right? Documenting what happened factually during GE14. What was your piece about? So titled The Amazing Race for Malaysia, right? Across the world.
So when elections were happening, I was actually in the UK doing my master's, and a lot of us, all the students there, hadn't received our postal vote yet.
Right.
And, or even if we did, we received it so close to date, we weren't sure we would be able to send it back in time. And I remember we were looking at FedEx and DHL and how expensive it would be to get it back within, what, 48 hours. And it just happened quite organically. All these Malaysians who, going back, said, I'll carry the ballots for other Malaysians. We met on social media, through Facebook, through WhatsApp, and we all sort of congregated at different places. You know, I think in London it was a few of the parks. I think similar things happened in Australia and New Zealand.
People met in airports,
strangers. In airports, yeah.
Strangers and pilots taking
so,
things home.
Exactly, and it was just really amazing how everyone was so trusting and so friendly.
What was your experience? When did you get the the ballot paper?
So I got mine late as well.
Ooh.
But because of these Malaysians who are going back, we managed to find somebody, and we all met, I think, Hyde Park or St. James, and gave them the ballot, and then they took it back. They stopped at KL Central. Everyone's parents or siblings went to KL Central, collected the ballots, and then continued on their drive back.
Right.
So I think mine arrived like the day of or just the day before.
So I mean, these were the feel-good stories that were circulating around that time. But how do you balance the descriptive and the analytical? Kean, you have an overall sense. You were commissioning pieces, or you were picking up on already published work and thinking, what is the balance between the analytical and the descriptive in this collection?
Well, I think we try and mix it again with a lot of data that's coming out from all sorts of places, some of it unreliable data as well, I must point out.
Unreliable?
Yes, well, contentious, right? And it's good to have, I think, to me, trustworthy, credible analysts to go through it. For instance, the Malaysian economist based in Singapore, Lee Hock Wan, has a wonderful piece, really, about, how this economy is being reframed post-NEP, post-kleptocracy, all that. So I think that's very interesting. Another contentious one, which makes a polemic, but I feel based on evidence out there, by Professor James Chin from the Asia Institute in University of Tasmania, in which he argues we have to be very careful not to have a secessionist movement like the Catalans in Spain over Sabah and Sarawak. And I think these are worthwhile policy issues that we need to think and grapple with and take it seriously.
So you said, okay, so there are contentious pieces in the book, but you said that you wanted to stay away from contentious data. What were you referencing?
Well,
in that
I think this might be a bit of an in-joke amongst those of us who dwell in the economics area. Speaking as a not really economist myself, but I somehow hang out with a lot of economists who have a lot of problem in the region with rubbery figures. The stats departments tend to be weaponized for all sorts of governance. And Malaysia is not as bad as that, but we had a lot of problems during the previous government over what turned out to be rubbery figures over scandals like 1MDB.
Okay, well, we're going to come back and continue this conversation in just a couple of minutes. Make sure you don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.